Did you know that your own brain is trying to sabotage you and it's stopping you from being creative? Let me show you how, and together we can figure out how we can short-circuit it. You see, in evolutionary terms, humans are not really adapted for creativity. In fact, it's just quite the opposite. We're wired for automation. It's a lot more beneficial for the prehistoric version of ourselves to react quickly in dangerous situations without having to overthink it. Like the fact that you don't really have to think about it when you're driving a car. You're not thinking about pressing the pedals or turning the wheel. And you're also not thinking about what to do when you see a red light. You just kind of do it automatically. The same applies when you're learning more complex skills, like playing sports or learning to play musical instruments. There is a term for this, it's called muscle memory. Athletes practice a certain set of skills over and over again until they're so deeply ingrained that they don't have to think about them. So repeated thoughts and actions fortify pathways in the brain, making them much more likely to reoccur. The science behind this, of course, has to do with the myelination of neurons in the brain. Myelin is this thick, fatty protective layer around neurons that grows thicker over time as the pathways become more fortified. That makes it easier and faster for messages to travel from one neuron to the next. And it forces that signaling to become the dominant pathway for that particular activity. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine you are in a forest and you're trying to get from point A to point B. And the only way to get there is through a faint little trail that you see between the trees. And so you decide to take that trail and you keep walking that same pathway back and forth along the trail. Now over time, that trail becomes wider and thicker until it becomes the most dominant way to get from point A to point B. It reaches a point where there's literally makes no sense to use any other way. It's the easiest, the safest, and probably the fastest way. You've always walked from point A to point B down the same path. Why would you use anything else? And so when it comes to ideas, our brain will always choose the path of least resistance. Every time we're faced with a decision, our brain gently steers us in a direction that we're already familiar with. Something we've done before, even if subconsciously. But don't worry, the fact is that everybody does this. We're all humans, and we're all wired for automation. This is where all the common ideas live. They're logical, predictable, even a little boring, but they make sense. But they're probably not very creative. So now that you understand what your brain is trying to do to you, you could take a conscious decision to break away from these common thought patterns and carve a new route to a solution. Back to the forest analogy, you could make a choice to literally jump into a completely different part of the forest, into an unexplored territory, right into the bushes. And that way you force yourself to carve yourself a new path back to your destination. Now along the way, as you are, climbing and cutting your way through the thick forest, you are carving a new route. You're discovering new things along the way. Maybe a cool squirrel. And this is where all of the creative ideas live. You just have to find them. So how can you do this? Well, you can use a variety of creativity tools to help you break out of those natural thinking patterns. You also need the right inspiration. And by that I mean lots and lots of examples of what others are doing well and what works. You also need practice, repeating this process over and over again until you can master it. With enough time, you would have gained enough experience that the process becomes easy. So now you know that in order to be creative, you literally have to go against the fundamental principles of your own biology. It does need effort, at least in the beginning, but the process can be simple. You can learn more about various creativity tools you can use in our creativity manual. You can find a link in the description below. But for now, keep practicing, and I'll see you soon.